Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
40 Sports Network here, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. It is now day one, maybe day two, however you want to slice it. I could say day one, day two, day whatever of Coach Watch. That's right. So we've gone from wondering when Brian Callahan was going to get fired to now that Brian Callahan has gotten fired, wondering who is going to be the next coach of the Titans. And we will have today on our program, we will have our coaching board 2.0. And we're also going to unveil the coaching rules, as in we're going to disqualify people that would not fit or make sense as far as the next Titans coach is concerned. Be sure, here as you join this program today, be sure to hit the like button and be sure to subscribe. Again, we are right there on the cusp of 3,000 followers, and we would absolutely love it to get to 3,000 today. Now, as of right now, and these plans may change, but the expectation is that today we're going to go a little bit longer because Albert Breer is supposed to join us at 3 o'clock at the top of the hour. So if you're a podcast listener, you may not have the podcast uploaded at the normal time, but at the same time, you may get Albert Breer. And if his schedule gets pushed back, then we'll probably do it tomorrow. So again, hit that like, hit that subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and so on and so forth here on the program. So I want to start today's show on day one of Coach Search. The day after the Titans announced the firing of Brian Callahan, and the day that Mike McCoy has met with the media for the first time as the interim head coach of the Titans. And the big question everybody has is, where are they going to go from here? But I think I want to address the first issue as to where we are now, and something I just can't get over. And it's not something I can't get over with the team, as much as it is something I can't get over with the fan base. And I understand yesterday Chad Brinker announced the firing of Brian Callahan, and Chad Brinker answered most of the questions about the decision to fire Brian Callahan. But if you've been following the Tennessee Titans, it's hard to envision that this was Chad Brinker's decision, even though he said it was a joint decision, and even though they all said, oh yeah, we needed to make a change. We needed to do this. We needed to do that. Again, it's hard to envision this was a Chad Brinker decision. These are Amy Adams Strunk decisions. And these kind of decisions where there's a surprise firing and it's, whoa, I can't believe that they did it. I got to say, that predates Chad Brinker being here and screwing around with everything. A lot of national media people were kind of shocked yesterday when the Titans announced the Callahan firing. Adam Schefter had said an hour before Callahan got fired on McAfee's show that he didn't think any coach was getting fired anytime soon. And that is because I think those national media people, I presume, have been told by Chad Brinker that Callahan wasn't getting fired, which means, as is often the case with the Titans, that it was an Amy Adams Strunk. She picked up the phone on Monday or Sunday and said, fire him. So yesterday, Amy Adams Strunk wasn't at the press conference. And as we all know, and it is well documented, Amy Adams Strunk will not answer for what happened, what she created, or, and I think this is most important right now, why she trusts Chad Brinker, or why she stopped trusting Brian Callahan, or what she expects out of Chad Brinker, or why we should trust Chad Brinker, given the fact that he's been a part of every bad decision the Titans have made since he got here. And yesterday, PK in the press conference, I thought did a good job of kind of pinning Chad Brinker down on where in the fuck Amy Adams Strunk is in all of this.
Where is she right now? Where? What do you mean?
Where's Amy Adams Strunk right now?
Yeah, she's at her home.
Why isn't she here?
I'm here representing her.
Can you guys?
Okay. I'm here representing her. Where's Amy? I love that part. Paul and I were on the football show this morning and we were talking about, I said, I love the fact that Brinker was like, what do you mean? Brinker knew exactly what Paul was asking. He was trying to figure out, how am I going to answer this question? Because everyone wants to know, so where is the owner? Why isn't the owner sitting there and telling us why she trusts you? Why do we have to listen to why we should trust you? Why can't she, the one who does trust you, the only person who trusts you, why can't she answer that question? And I was kind of shocked when PK pinned Chad Brinker down and Chad Brinker sat there and was like, what do you mean? I'm so shocked. How dare Paul Kaharski ask where the owner who makes all these decisions is? I mean, she's at home. Which also made Brinker look stupid, that he wasn't more confident in explaining the fact that, look, Amy has been a part of this entire process. She has entrusted me to speak for the team. When I say something, it's something that has already been discussed with Amy, and I'm here to tell you that Amy has been a part of our team and in our facility, and she's not here right now, but this is a collective decision spearheaded by something that just had a little confidence to it. But man, that PK and Brinker interaction was polarizing yesterday, and I was kind of surprised that it was. There were two sides of this fan base. There was the who cares where the owner is, PK side of the fan base, and the way to go, PK, way to ask the hard questions. Now, I sit in that second group. Again, I'm not giving Paul some big pat on the back because I think that's kind of the job, but I am acknowledging, hey, Kaharski and TD and Buck and other people in that press conference, they made Chad Brinker uncomfortable, and Chad Brinker should be uncomfortable. Again, with the exception of the Robinson firing and the Carthon hiring, Brinker's been a part of every single fuck up this organization has had for the last 3 years. But I was surprised that, again, that PK Brinker where's Amy discussion was so polarizing, because I'm shocked at how many people in this fan base think that this mess with this football team is just Brian Callahan's fault. Social media. Why are people grilling Chad Brinker and demanding to talk to the owner when everyone agrees with the fact that Brian Callahan was a bad coach? And I do agree with that Brian Callahan is a bad coach. But I'm sitting here as a Titans fan, and I'm thinking, because the one who's pushing all the buttons on this train wreck, the one who hired Brian Callahan, who was incompetent, the one who dumped Mike Vrabel to promote Rand Carthon, who fired John Robinson in the middle of the season when the team was in first place, because she's the one making those decisions, and because if the next move is as stupid as the last three, you're going to be terrible even if Brian Callahan is gone. And for some reason, people in this fan base, they just either don't want to admit it, don't want to accept it, or don't want to talk about it. And I figured this out. This fan base, and maybe this is all fan bases, but this fan base has two types of thinkers. In psychology, this is the difference between systemic reasoning, which is understanding the environment or the structure that causes outcomes, and attributional reasoning, which is blaming individuals. Like when it comes to these young quarterbacks, and I'll say coaches too, Todd Bowles, pretty good away from the Jets. Sam Darnold, pretty good away from the Jets. Geno Smith, kind of good away from the Jets. So maybe that is a systemic issue with the Jets, who stink. Whereas, again, the attributional thinker would just think Bowles stinks, Darnold stinks, Geno stinks. And so these systemic thinkers are saying, why does this keep happening to this football team? How come it feels like every single year they have some sort of new management structure, and it's some sort of revolutionary management structure, and every year at the end they say, oh, that one was wrong, so we're changing it, and we can't look at the one person who keeps changing it as the problem around here. We have to say it was the numbnuts coach. Again, who fired the numbnuts coach? Who hired him? Who's going to hire the next coach? And so I have to ask you people that are attributional thinkers, how can you people not realize that the problem is well above Brian Callahan? That this organization was a total shit show before Brian Callahan showed up. And yes, it got worse. But how can you hope that it's going to get meaningfully better even without him, with Amy still calling the shots? And with Amy unavailable because she was at home. I think there was a new episode of that Kathy Bates Matlock on. She's probably watching that. With her unavailable to answer for it, it leaves people like me, who is a Titans fan, utterly hopeless that this organization can or will get it right. And that is why I am hopeless, because I am a systemic thinker. I see an environment that when Chad Brinker was the president of football operations and Brian Callahan got hired and Burke Nihill was the CEO and Bryce Wasserman was stooping the owner's daughter, that they all teamed together along with Rand Carthon to pick Brian Callahan. And while Rand Carthon was here for that, at this point, for the next coach, Chad Brinker is still the president of football operations, Burke Nihill is still the CEO, and Bryce Wasserman is still stooping the owner's daughter. So congratulations. They drafted Cam Ward, but Cam Ward is now in a system of chaos, while working with and for morons only makes it infinitely more likely, almost inevitable to me, that he will fail. Not because Cam Ward is the problem, but because there's no one here to nurture him. It's like that couple, that is having a child, and that child doesn't have a chance. That's Cam Ward. And yet, yesterday, last night, after the press conference, everything else, it was, oh my God, PK, who cares where the owner is? They fired Callahan. Yeah. So many of you think Callahan was a problem and think, I guess, Amy deserves a pass, or Amy is beyond reproach. And I'm so surprised and frankly disappointed by it. So for this next step to work, when they hire the coach, either Amy Adams Strunk, has to change, or you have to get insanely lucky. And I have to ask this question. When has luck ever really been on the Titans side? In the 20 years, 25, 30 years they've been a football team? When has luck been on their side? So that's the first thing here on our program today. And of course, Stillman & Company is presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. And I always love to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical because they've been in business since 1990. They are family owned and operated, and they've got 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be here. The service is free. And if a customer is not pleased with the work performed, they will make it right. They are professional, they are experienced, and they are trustworthy. And their technicians come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. And I know that because I use Hiller at my home. They put on the little boots when they walk into your house, and they take great care of my home. Learn more at happyhiller.com. That's also where you can book a service appointment. It's very, very simple. I do it right from my phone. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Okay, the coaching board 2.0. Remember, we did the coaching board 1.0. I want to say maybe after the second week of the season, when I felt like it was pretty obvious that the Titans were going to go in a different direction, that I knew that Callahan wasn't going to make it. So as we start the coaching board, because I know everybody wants to talk coaches, even though as a Titan fan, I am, again, still depressed because I have this hopeless feeling that Amy Adams Strunk is not going to get this right. But because I know everybody wants to talk coaches, I think we need to start with a couple of ground rules that we need to put in place, or maybe I just need to set down for everybody in terms of what the expectations for the next coach are going to be, so that you know who not to ask for. Think of it as a game of guess who. You know, the little board game where you say, does your person have blue eyes? And nope, my person doesn't have blue eyes. It's like, well, that's it for Susie, Chucky, Stevie, and Tommy. Are they wearing glasses? So I'm going to tell you what they're not going to hire so you can flip down some of these names. Number one, the Titans are not going to hire a coach who is currently suing the NFL. The Titans constantly do what the NFL tells them to do. It's why they hired Rand Carthon, and they aren't going to hire a coach who is actively suing them in court. So that is a no-go on John Gruden and a no-go on Brian Flores. Take them off the list. But John Gruden would be a perfect fit. They're not hiring a coach who is suing the NFL. Off the list, Gruden and Flores. Number two, according to reports, the Titans are paying Brian Callahan $3 million a season, which means that you people that want them to hire Dan Lanning at Oregon or a top college coach, you need to understand that one of two things would have to happen. Either the top college coach would have to take a pay cut. Dan Lanning makes $10.4 million a season. Again, if it were the right coach, I could see the Titans paying more than they were paying to Callahan, but they're not going to pay $10 million for a coach. Or the Titans would have to pay significantly more. And they're not going to do that. So good luck on that second part happening. The Titans deciding to pay $10 million for a coach, not going to happen. So I think all the expensive college guys are out. And you also have to pay the schools buyouts, and it's not happening. Number three, Chad Brinker is not going to hire a coach who outranks him and or Mike Borgonzi. He's just not going to do it. This whole thing has been a power grab, it feels like, from the very beginning anyways. And while I don't think there is a current head coach who is a free agent head coach that would demand that kind of respect or that kind of authority, there's not a Harbaugh out there in college right now that, well, if you bring in Harbaugh, you have to run the organization by his rules. There's not a Sean Payton right now on TV that, well, if you bring in Sean Payton, you're going to have to do the things the Sean Payton way. But let's say Kyle Shanahan and San Francisco were to break up at the end of the season. Or if Mike Tomlin and the Steelers were to finally go their separate ways. You'd have to pay that coach, and then you'd have to basically agree to give that coach total control. And Chad Brinker's not going to do that. So if there's any one of these current coaches that, man, if this guy gets fired, I'd love to have him, but he's going to want full control, it's not going to happen. Number four, the Titans are a very reactive group. They try to hire the opposite of what they just had. Mike Vrabel and John Robinson bickered, so they hired agreeable Rand Carthon to get along with Vrabel. Vrabel didn't really like or respect Rand Carthon, so they hired somebody who is the exact opposite of Mike Vrabel. Which means in some ways they'll probably be looking for the opposite of Brian Callahan. So a coordinator with no head coaching experience, whom they don't know and hasn't called plays, is probably out of the equation. And because they didn't know Callahan and he was such a bust, I think they'd be weary of a coordinator with mixed results whom they don't know, which might make it tough for them to hire Joe Brady or Jesse Minter. And finally, Anybody who has better options is not taking this job. So Ben Johnson last year, when he was the hot commodity, he's not taking this job. There's no way, there's no how, he's not taking this job. And I don't know who the hot coordinators are right now. It may be Joe Brady and Jesse Minter. But any of these coaches that have a bunch of good options, they may wait until next year before they go all in with the Titans. I hate that a guy lost his job in Brian Callahan, a very good job, and a very good guy lost his job. Now, he'll get paid, and that's fine. But these guys are born to coach. But Brian Callahan knew what he was signing up for when he joined this dumpster fire of an organization. Same with Mike Borgonzi, who, again, I thought was up there at that podium, so disinterested, sitting there thinking, why did I take this fucking job? Oh, I should have stayed in Kansas City. Somebody that has options, real options, they're not taking the Titan job. So, with that being said, let's go over the board. So I have put the board into 4 separate categories. And the first category that I am putting the coaching board into are the untested coordinators, because everybody loves the coordinators. Number 1, Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator at Baltimore. I know Baltimore sucks, but let's not kid ourselves. It's not Todd Monken's fault. He's a good coach, and he has college head coaching experience, but he doesn't have NFL head coaching experience, so he's number 1 on the untested coordinators. Number 2, Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator with the LA Chargers. He came with Harbaugh from Michigan. He actually used to be the DC at Vanderbilt. Jesse Minter is a hot name. People are going to say, I don't really know much about him. Number 3, Jeff Hafley. He is the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. He is the former head coach at Boston College. And again, if Chad Brinker's calling the shots, as I have said, Chad Brinker pleasures himself at night thinking about the Green Bay Packers. So you have to put a guy, even though he's the defensive side of the ball, you have to put a guy who has been a head coach in college, who is doing well for the Green Bay Packers on the list. 4th, I put Clint Kubiak, who is the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. Again, Sam Darnold lighting it up. And I know as well as anybody that apparently Sam Darnold never, ever gets any credit for his success. So it must be Clint Kubiak who's doing it. Number 5, Joe Brady in Buffalo, who, by the way, had an opportunity as a coordinator with Teddy Bridgewater and wasn't very good. So you're good with Joe Burrow and you're good with Josh Allen. Well, couldn't I be good with Joe Burrow and Josh Allen? He's number 5. And I put Adam Stenavich as number 6 on the list. I don't know him from a jar of Vicks, but he's the offensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. And again, who's running the Green Bay Packers? Oh, yes. And who's running the Titans? Mr. Packer. So that's the first group, the untested coordinators. Number 2, the second group on the coaching board, the former head coaches. Now, if I was looking for a coach, and I'm not looking for a coach, I don't own an NFL team, but if I was looking for a coach, I think I'd probably start with the former head coaches and then work in some of the untested coordinators, but that's just me. Former head coaches. Number 1, Matt Nagy. Number 2, Arthur Smith. Number 3, Mike McCarthy. Number 4, Cliff Kingsbury. Number 5, Robert Saleh. And I threw this one on there, even though he may not be interested, and he was a terrible head coach 15 years ago. But Steve Spagnuolo, again, Kansas City. Borgonzi is a part of this equation. How much of the equation is Borgonzi? I couldn't tell you. But he is a part of the equation. And Spagnuolo is experienced. He's on the list. The third category is what I am calling the dream coaches. Now, these are not coaches that a cheap organization like the Titans are going to hire, or an organization like the Titans where Chad Brinker is not going to give the coach that much power, is going to hire. But this is if they came available. Number 1, Nick Saban. Number 2, John Harbaugh. Number 3, Kyle Shanahan. Number 4, Mike Tomlin. And the one that I think is most likely to be on the move is Shanahan. Not that I think he would be, but it kind of feels like that era of 49er football, that window is closing. Deebo Samuel is gone. George Kittle is always hurt. Fred Warner is always hurt. Trent Williams is old. Really, Brock Purdy is kind of the only good young player that they still have around there. So maybe Shanahan, who can be a little abrasive, maybe he could be on the move. But if you hire Shanahan, Shanahan has it in his contract in San Francisco. If you hire Shanahan, Shanahan gets to pick the players. And I cannot imagine Chad Brinker would ever give that to somebody. So that's the third list. And then finally, I put other. Because I don't think they would be dream coaches, but they should at least be mentioned. Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, Kirk Cignetti at Indiana, though I don't think the Titans would pay that kind of money. And I am putting James Franklin on the list. And here's why I'm putting James Franklin on the list at others. Again, I wouldn't hire James Franklin. But you never know how well the Titans brass got to know James Franklin when he was at Vanderbilt. I mean, the word on the street is that the Titans hired their play-by-play guy. Granted, play-by-play and head coach are not the same thing. But they hired their play-by-play guy simply because Jim Nantz and Eric Church endorsed him. Oh, my God, you got to hire him. Well, if Jim Nantz tells us that's who we have to hire. And I don't know when Franklin was at Vanderbilt what kind of relationships he made with the people who run the Titans. And the other thing is, Franklin only gets paid the difference of what he would make at another job in, from what he's supposed to make at Penn State. So he's owed $50 million. And let's say the Titans pay him $5 million, then Penn State pays him $45. So Franklin could come in here and say, hey, pay me $2 million. Penn State pays me the rest, and then I get to pay all of my assistant coaches. And for a frugal organization like the Titans, that could make sense. So that is the coaching big board that, again, untested coordinators, Todd Monken in Baltimore, Jesse Minter with the Chargers, Jeff Hafley, the DC in Green Bay, Clint Kubiak, Joe Brady, and Adam Stenovich, the OC in Green Bay. Former head coaches, Matt Nagy, Arthur Smith, Mike McCarthy, Cliff Kingsbury, Robert Saleh, Steve Spagnuolo, Nick Saban, John Harbaugh, Kyle Shanahan, Mike Tomlin in the dream category. Again, I don't think the Titans would give that kind of power or pay that kind of money to those guys. And then Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, very smart guy, very analytical, very unemotional, very smart guy. He's probably too smart to want to take the job because he's got a good job at Vanderbilt where he went 2-10, 2 of his first 3 years and kept his job. Kurt Cignetti at IU, who is kind of old, kind of a college coach, and again, is making a lot of money, so I have a hard time believing that he would leave to come to the Titans as the Titans pay that money. And James Franklin, who again, he's got the energy, I would assume, for what the Titans would be looking for. So that's the coaching board. And I'm going to give you the names that, again, when we play that guess who, and we rule out coaches who are suing the NFL, so John Gruden and Brian Flores are not options. And we rule out the college coaches that are making a bunch of money. And we rule out guys that are going to want full control of the roster in the building. And we rule out guys that are anything like Callahan's resume, Joe Brady. It gives us a list of 7 guys. And that list is Matt Nagy, Arthur Smith, Jeff Hafley, Mike McCarthy, Steve Spagnuolo, Robert Saleh, and Todd Monken. That's the list. All have head coaching experience. None, I think, would be in high demand. So it's not like you're competing with a better organization for one of these coaches. I don't think any of them would come with exceedingly high salary requests, given the fact that, again, they're not going to have a lot of options as far as the head coaching market is concerned. And I probably should add an eighth onto the list. And that is Mike McCoy. I'm not expecting him to get the head coaching job. But again, as we all know, Amy Adams Strunk is the absolute wild card. And when it comes to Amy Adams Strunk, the truth is she may fall in love with this guy. So again, that's our coaching board. And those are our rules when it comes to who the Titans are going to hire as their coach. Again, they're not going to pay a bunch of money for a guy because they were paying $3 million to Callahan. And they're going to sit there and say, okay, well, let's pay $13 million to a coach now. They don't do that. And if I had my choice of anybody on the list, and again, I think I may be playing this safe, but if I had my choice of anybody on the list, I believe that my choice would be Arthur Smith. And I'm serious when I say that. If I had to put my stamp down on one of these guys to say, hey, you know what? I feel comfortable with this person being the coach of the Titans right now on October 14th, and there's still 3-4 months to go in this, I'm putting it down for Arthur Smith. And here's why I would have serious interest in Arthur Smith. And I think this is very important. Instead of the idea that everybody will talk about if they hire Arthur, the connecting of the dots that Amy Adams Strunk knows Arthur Smith, I think it's more important that in this situation, Arthur Smith knows Amy Adams Strunk. All those years in the organization, watching from afar, starting at the very bottom, working his way all the way up to offensive coordinator, Arthur knows how the Titans do business. And that could be a huge plus, that when he gets the job, there is no orientation of how to deal with Amy, how to deal with all the different masters that the head coach and the general manager have to answer to when it comes to being with the Titans. And I also think Arthur Smith would bring in a huge amount of trust towards the owner. She knows him. The fans, they know him. The former players, they know him. And the people inside the building that are still there that this Burke Nihill, Chad Brinker, Mike Vrabel group hasn't run off. And before you rip the idea of hiring people that you know, because I would agree, hiring people you know, and just saying, hey, I only want to hire people I know is not a good idea. Remember that Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Eagles, went out and hired Chip Kelly. Fired Andy Reid, and look, no one's going to say that was a bad decision because Andy had been there for a long time, and it was time to go ahead and make a change, whatever. They hired Chip Kelly. It was a disaster, and they went out and got Doug Peterson, who they knew because he was Andy's right-hand man. So they won a Super Bowl with a coach that they knew. And when it comes to Arthur, I need more details on why Atlanta busted under Arthur. 7-10 for 3 seasons, which means it was nothing like the train wrecks that have happened since the Titans have brought in Rand Carthon and then Vrabel and Callahan. And 7-10 is not good, but it's respectable. And I'm trying to figure out why they went into that 2023 season with only Desmond Ridder at quarterback and Taylor Heineke as the backup and not kind of a real backup plus kind of guy, like a Daniel Jones kind of guy. Why they didn't have one of those, especially in a year where Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold were signing backup contracts. But I'm willing to look at Arthur's body of work. I'm willing to look at his familiarity with the organization. And I include his body of work in Pittsburgh with the corpse of Aaron Rodgers and the corpse of Russell Wilson as a positive, as well as his performance as the offensive coordinator here with the Titans. So I see a lot of positive when it comes to Arthur Smith. And 2 years ago, when we were going over coaching possibilities, I said, hey, the safety in all of this needs to be Arthur Smith. That if you go through this and you can't get a good coach to want the job, or the top coaches you liked want other jobs, or you can't settle, at the end of the day, you can always go back to Arthur Smith, because you know Arthur Smith, and I know Arthur Smith. I don't know Arthur Smith very well, but I know Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith's a good coach. He's a good guy. He's a good coach. And I do feel like Callahan, a guy who seemed to check all the boxes, and then when you watched him coach, he was kind of a bozo. I do think that plays in Arthur's favor, because the owner knows Arthur Smith, not a bozo. So that's the one right now that I feel the most comfortable with putting my stamp on and saying, hey, I'd like to see that guy coach the Tennessee Titans. So that's the first thing. Well, I guess that's technically the second thing, because the first thing was all about where Amy is. And again, Albert Breer is going to join us here on the program. So we're going to go a little bit long, usually a little bit longer than we normally go. We're normally done at 3, but I think this is a good thing if you are a podcast listener. You know, it may be up a little bit later. Can't be up later than it was yesterday, since the podcast, we didn't get off the show until like 4:30. So it can't be that much later. It won't be, but I figure we should talk to Albert Breer for 30 minutes or so, 20 minutes or so. And so because of that, we'll go a little bit later today, and we'll get Bert on, and we'll ask him all the questions about what he's hearing about the Titans and the coaching job and everything else. So I heard Mike McCoy talk to the media today. And when it came to Mike McCoy, I have to say I was a little impressed. I felt like I heard a coach who sounded like a coach, and not like a guy who was just trying to pump sunshine, just trying to tell everybody what they want to hear, which is how I felt about Brian Callahan 90% of the time that he was the coach. Mike McCoy is in a very uncomfortable spot that interim head coaches often get thrown into, which is, I have to get up there and give a press conference and explain how things are going to be different from the guy that yesterday I was reporting to, a guy who put his reputation on the line to hire me. I've seen it happen so many times, and it is very uncomfortable. It actually kind of reminds me of Kamala Harris running for president, and people saying, so how are you going to be different than Biden? And you don't want to disrespect the person over here, but you need to convince the person over there. And I thought Mike McCoy in his press conference did a very good job of that. I thought Mike McCoy did a very good job of being accountable and saying everybody shares in the responsibility of what's happened so far this season. I thought Mike McCoy did a very good job in talking about his relationship with Brian Callahan and what his expectations for the coaches are. I think this team, and I could be wrong, I think that they're not going to be much better, but they are going to look more organized, because I simply don't think it could be any worse. And the one thing about Callahan, he didn't know how to be a head coach. I say that with all due respect, but he just doesn't know what he's doing. Mike McCoy was a head coach long enough in the NFL and had enough success that we know that Mike McCoy can be an interim head coach in the National Football League. But I actually had an epiphany today, because yesterday it felt so crazy and out of character and everything. It felt so wild yesterday that the Titans would fire Brian Callahan after not firing Brian Callahan after about week 3 or week 4, when it was abundantly clear that Callahan was not the guy. Callahan was not going to figure it out. I mean, I hate to say this because he's a nice guy. He was an incompetent coach. And last year, Callahan made a lot of mistakes. And the Titans told me, they said, hey, Brian's got to change things, but Brian will be the first to tell you that. And then Brian didn't really change a lot. And he implemented the Pee Wee program. And I said, you got to be kidding me with this. And then the Denver game. Disaster for the coach. Then they got crushed at home by the Rams. Then they got crushed at home by the Colts. And now it's DEFCON 1 for the head coach. On the road at Houston, where the owner lives, where the owner gets embarrassed, and they lose by 26 points. And she didn't fire him. And that morning, I remember being on full alert, saying, I am just waiting for that text message to come through and say, or the tweet from the Titans or the email or whatever. I'm just waiting for it to come through for somebody to say Callahan's fired, and Callahan to get fired. And I had an epiphany because I knew she wasn't going to fire him after the Vrabel game. I knew she was not going to let Mike Vrabel come in here and win by 55 points. And she was not going to fire Mike Vrabel's replacement the next day and give Mike Vrabel the satisfaction of being the reason that they fired the coach. And when you fire Callahan before the Vrabel game, you may give Mike Vrabel even more satisfaction, because all anybody's going to talk about this week, and all the national media is talking about, is about how bad things have been for the Titans since they fired the great Mike Vrabel. But I have a feeling, call it a gut feeling. And today Kaharski laughed at me when I told him about my gut feeling. But I have a feeling the Titans are going to win on Sunday. And the reason I think the Titans are going to win on Sunday is because Sunday's game is the perfect Mike Vrabel special. Vrabel already won the Buffalo game. Now, Buffalo, that win doesn't look as impressive because they lost to Atlanta last night, but they already won the Buffalo game, which is the Vrabel special in a good way. And what have we learned about Mike Vrabel with the Mike Vrabel special? Beat the world champion Eagles, lose to a rookie Josh Allen the next week. Beat Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, lose to Tyrod Taylor, Mac Jones, and Zach Wilson. The Mike Vrabel special. And there is a bounce that comes when you fire the head coach for the next week. I will never forget. I've talked about that game where it felt like the Titans returned to relevancy for the first time in eons when Ryan Suckup made that field goal at Kansas City. They beat defending champion Buffalo. They beat Kansas City in Kansas City. They're back in the mix for the division. And Jacksonville is just getting the shit kicked out of them by Houston. And I thought, oh no, because Jacksonville fired Gus Bradley the next day. And they made Doug Marrone the interim coach. And now you have to go to Jacksonville, a bad team that just got boat raced, with a new interim coach. And I thought, oh, I hate that. Here comes the interim coach bump. And Jacksonville played that game like a pack of wolves. There is a bounce that comes when you fire the coach. In 2015, the Titans were god-awful, fired Ken Whisenhunt, the next week went on the road and beat New Orleans in overtime. I think that Sunday is Amy's Super Bowl. And while I don't think Amy thinks they're going to win, I think she was waiting, probably since about week 2, for this moment to fire Brian Callahan, because she wants to give herself any chance she can get to beat Mike Vrabel. And I have a feeling they're going to win on Sunday. And I think Mike McCoy is a better coach than Brian Callahan, because how could he not be? And I think there is somewhat of a bump that comes when you fire the coach. And so she strategically, and I know a lot of the things she does are very stupid, but I think maybe they said, you know what? We've got this card to play. We can only play it once during the year. We get that bounce. What's the card we want to play? Let's play it before the Vrabel game. So that's why I think she waited until yesterday to make the move on Mike McCoy. Because she knew she gets one crack at this, and all she wants to do is beat Mike Vrabel. They can lose every other game. Just go beat Mike Vrabel. That's all she cares about. And I even said to Kaharski, I bet Kaharski $20. I don't think she's going to the game Sunday because I think she's afraid she's going to lose by 50. And the last thing she wants, and you know Vrabel will do it, the last thing she wants is for Mike Vrabel to be sitting up there in the box, or excuse me, not sitting up there in the box, standing there on the sidelines, looking up into the box where she's sitting. For some reason, my nose, if you're watching the stream, is just itching the crap out of me, and I can't explain it. So I just think that I think this is, she wants the bounce. She wants the interim coach bounce, and she wants it for this game. And I've got a gut feeling because I know the Mike Vrabel special. I lived through losing to Zach Wilson. Think about this. In 2021, the Tennessee Titans beat Patrick Mahomes, Matthew Stafford, Josh Allen, Indianapolis twice, but they lost to Russell Wilson when he was still good. But they lost to Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Tyrod Taylor, and some other crap bomb. I think it was Roethlisberger at the end. So I'm just saying. Daniel says, even though most of y'all are subscribed, make sure you like each episode as it helps the numbers. There we go. Way to go. Speaking of the great Mike Vrabel, I do want to get to this because this bothers me. And I don't totally know why this bothers me. But yesterday when the Titans fired Brian Callahan, there were a bunch of graphics and a bunch of tweets and everything else in which said, the Titans have won 4 games since they fired the great Mike Vrabel. And the great Mike Vrabel is so great, he's already won 4 games in New England. By the way, that crappy Raider team you played last week, yeah, he lost to them. Congratulations, you beat the Saints and the Panthers. Way to go. Now, the Buffalo win was impressive. Who knows how good Buffalo is? I don't know, but that was an impressive win. That was a Vrabel special. But everybody's acting like Mike Vrabel has fixed the Patriots, and on they go to the Super Bowl. Now, I think Vrabel's a good coach, but I don't think Vrabel is an incredible coach. And that's what drives me nuts. The narrative, the belief that those morons, how could they have fired Mike Vrabel? And yesterday, Kirk Herbstreit sent out a tweet when Albert Breer put down the dysfunction that has been the Titans for the last 3 years and said, that is incredible. Still waiting for someone to explain to me how Vrabes isn't still the head coach in Nashville. Just bizarre decisions. New stadium coming in 2027 too. Better figure it out fast, says Herbie. And this is what drives me insane. Is Vrabel a good coach? Yeah, he's a good coach. And I've always said that. I said that even when I wanted to fire him. I said, I think Vrabel's a good coach, but like most things in life, I think Mike Vrabel has his strengths and his weaknesses, and his strengths are very good, especially in the beginning, motivating people, holding them accountable, getting their best efforts, his dedication to the rule book, but his arrogance is a weakness. And it's like everybody in the world just pretends none of that's true. And they always love to talk about the numbers. And they love to say, look at how bad Tennessee has been since they fired the great Mike Vrabel. But nobody says that about John Robinson. Nobody has the energy to talk about what the Titans' record was with John Robinson compared to their record without John Robinson. And this is not a John Robinson defense, which I know you people are going to make this out to be. You're going to say, oh, there goes Jared. Jared is out there trying to hold J-Rob. And that's not what I'm doing. But what I am saying is when it comes to the Vrabel thing, John Robinson had a better record in Tennessee as the general manager than Mike Vrabel did as the coach. Think about that. Robinson never had a losing season. Vrabel was 7-10 and was 6-11 his last 2 years. Robinson was 9-7 2 years in a row without Mike Vrabel and went to the playoffs. Robinson won 61% of his games as the general manager of the Titans. They've won 27% since he left. Vrabel didn't win 61% of his games. So what is it about Mike Vrabel that gives every single person amnesia when it comes to why the Titans fired him? And look, I'm not here to argue that choosing Ran Carthon over Mike Vrabel isn't one of the single stupidest decisions a human being can make. And I'm not here to argue that Brian Callahan, Mr. Pee-wee program, is a better coach than Mike Vrabel. I'll never argue that because it's not true and I don't believe it. But to act as if Mike Vrabel invented the Titans, or that the Titans are no good because they got rid of Mike Vrabel and that the Titans would be winning Super Bowls if Mike Vrabel is still the coach, is ridiculous. And I think it all goes back to Vrabel using that clock maneuver against Belichick in a playoff game. And it's like, wow, this coach, he's so smart. But is it really that smart? It's not like Vrabel went into the rule book, found the rule, and used it on Belichick. Belichick used the rule during the season. Vrabel saw Belichick use the rule and then went and copied it. So again, to everybody out there in the ether that says, oh, how dare they fire the great Mike Vrabel? And look at how bad it is since they fired the great Mike Vrabel. I will tell you, it was bad when the great Mike Vrabel was here. Do we need to talk about Todd Downing? Do we need to go over Jason Hodeling and Keith Carter as the offensive line coaches? Do we need to go over the 0-7 at the end of the 22 season? Do we need to talk about Andre Dillard and Aaron Brewer in 2023? Do we need to go over the fact that Mike Vrabel, again, always got up there and talked about how great he was, but when things weren't going well, Vrabel was never one to be accountable about it. And for some reason, everybody around the country just thinks that the hillbillies in Tennessee don't know what they're doing, which is true, but that they fired Vince Lombardi Jr. And I'm like, I lived through the end of Vrabel. It was time for Vrabel to go. And I also don't understand how many people don't realize or don't accept that Mike Vrabel was incredibly disrespectful to the owner, and you can't do that in the NFL. You can't be incredibly disrespectful to the owner. And when you go to New England, and you get up there and you say things like, trust me, I've been a lot of places. It's not as good as it is here, Patriot fans. And then you're asked about it, which I asked him. And you don't say something like, hey, I just meant that it was special with all the Super Bowls that they've won and all the memories we had. And that's what we're trying to build here. Something where we can remember have the great memories and the Super Bowls and everything. Vrabel couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. And then it came out after the fact that the owner was waiting for Vrabel to come to him to say, hey, I didn't mean that about you. And it's like, Vrabel thought he was too good for that. You're never too good for the owner. And at some point, that'll happen with him and Robert Kraft, because that's just how Vrabel is. But, I mean, the coaching staff at the end was a disaster. The Craig Aukerman thing was a disaster. And yet everyone's like, oh, the great Mike Vrabel. Curtis says, you didn't like Vrabel, Jared. You guys had beef. Let me say this. I liked Mike Vrabel fine. I'm sure Mike Vrabel doesn't like me. I don't know. I don't care. I liked Vrabel. I thought Vrabel was fun to be around. I thought Vrabel was a good coach. I thought Vrabel was a great coach to cover. I mean, there was always some drama with some bullshit he said. With Vrabel, there was always something passive-aggressive. There was always somebody that he was mad at. There was always a half-truth he was hiding behind. I enjoyed that. And for a lot of people, the day that I asked Vrabel about the New England comments and Vrabel gave the whole "think like a man, Jared" speech, when I was sitting there, I didn't hear that and think, oh man, I gotta go. This man, he questioned my manhood. I want to fight him. I sat there and I thought, oh my God, this is so good for business. And I thought it was. But again, it's just like, Vrabel, how could that organization get rid of Vrabel? And I'm like, nobody has the same energy for John Robinson, even though John Robinson won more games as general manager than Mike Vrabel won as head coach. And it's because the narrative is more important than the facts. It's like Mac Jones. Everybody with the narrative said Mac Jones stunk, but the facts were Mac Jones went to the playoffs when he had a real offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels. And then when Belichick lost his marbles and put Matt Patricia out there, he wasn't so good. Could it have been the team's fault? No, Mac Jones. Mac Jones, he's soft. Belichick went to the press in New England when Mac Jones had a sprained ankle and told the press that Mac Jones was kind of milking it. Now, Belichick didn't put his name on it, but most people believe that it came from Belichick. Did you see Mac Jones in that Thursday night game? Dude could barely walk. And he's like, yeah, I know I got it right there. I think it lacerated my kidney, but 29 Zebo ZX straight post X2. You guys got that? All right, ready, break. Let's go. Mac Jones is a tough son of a bitch now. But Belichick convinced everybody otherwise because it's the narrative. It's not the facts. The narrative is that the Titans are an unmitigated disaster and they only made things worse by getting rid of Mike Vrabel. The facts, to me, are that Mike Vrabel was a part of the problem. And I would just like history to be remembered correctly, not, again, on the narrative. Let's get to some of your reaction here on the program. Again, Albert Breer is supposed to join us at the top of the hour, so we will go on a little bit later than normal. Let's get the information. Let's hear what they have to say. The distinguished gentleman says, Mike McCarthy is the only proven commodity. He is the only answer, proven commodities only. So here's what I will say if you bring up Mike McCarthy, which, again, he's on the list. I mean, I'm not a huge Mike McCarthy fan, but I do give credit to the fact that Mike McCarthy has worked in two very unique situations. It is a very unique situation in Dallas. It is a very unique situation where there's no owner in Green Bay. And it's a very unique situation in Tennessee where the owner is off her rocker. And he did have success in Dallas. And he did have success in Green Bay. But if you're going to say only proven commodities, then I will push back and say, do you want Belichick? And the answer is no. He's out there. Do you want Doug Peterson? He won a Super Bowl, went to the playoffs in Jacksonville. And I would argue the answer there is no. So I'm not just saying, hey, it has to be a proven winner. I mean, I ask you, what's tougher? With Dak Prescott as your quarterback to go to the playoffs a couple of times in Dallas, or with Mitch Trubisky as your quarterback to go to the playoffs a couple of times in Chicago? And I would argue it's harder to get to the playoffs with Trubisky in Chicago when you're playing in a division with Aaron Rodgers and Minnesota than it is to get to the playoffs with Dak. Brett says, Jared, where is Eddie George? You know, I was talking to Paul about this when we were doing the football show today. And I said, what drives me crazy is when it comes to the Titans and it comes to whom they might hire and everything else. What drives me crazy about the Eddie George stuff is when you say Eddie George and you throw out Eddie George's name and you're like, Eddie George, the head coach at Bowling Green, who just left TSU. Eddie George should be the coach. Now you put people like me or PK or people who have covered the team and know Eddie George and like Eddie George and have a boatload of respect for Eddie George. Now you put us in a position where we have to say something bad about Eddie George because we're the ones that then have to point out that he's not qualified. And I know that that guy put the crying emoji in there. He's not serious about Eddie George, but I think there are Titan fans that are legitimately serious about Eddie George being the next coach of the Titans. And I'm sorry, Eddie George, great guy, great leader, great Titan. He's not qualified to be head coach of the Titans. One person says, Arthur Smith is my first choice. TDG says, Art made Russell Wilson and Justin Fields look good. Boy, I'll tell you, Justin Fields, he cannot pass the football, eh? Woo! Brutal. Curtis says, you wanted to hire his offensive coordinator. Vrabel promoted Arthur Smith when he was the tight ends coach. If you know Vrabel, the way that I know Vrabel, the way that people that followed Vrabel on a daily basis, which is most of you, if you know Mike Vrabel, you know the story behind why they hired Arthur Smith. They hired Arthur Smith because Matt LaFleur wanted to bring Arthur Smith with him to Green Bay, and Vrabel said, no, not going to do that. That's why he did it, not because, and I've been told Arthur Smith is not going to work for Mike Vrabel again, for whatever that's worth. Speaking of the Titans coaching search, and speaking of somebody that knows a thing or two about Mike Vrabel and what's going on in New England, as again, this is Vrabel week, and I am convinced that Amy Adams Strunk decided she wanted to make this move to try to get the head coaching bounce, the interim coaching bounce with Mike McCoy, hopefully, to beat Mike Vrabel. Albert Breer joins us, senior insider, senior reporter from the Monday Morning Quarterback. Albert, you know all about Mike Vrabel. You know all about drama. You know all about Amy Adams Strunk. I start with this. How shocked, Adam Schefter was on the McAfee show, and he said that there was going to be any coaching changes. And a lot of people locally have been told, don't expect a coaching change. And then Brian Callahan got fired. What do you make of it?
Well, I think the best thing, the easiest way to look at this is before the season, I think there were some questions about the direction of everything, of course, again, and for the fourth straight year that was in question. And I think after they got a few games in, there was this feeling, okay, it's probably a fait accompli, that we are going to be making a coaching change at the end of the year. However, there probably isn't great benefit in getting rid of Brian Callahan right now. It's not toxic yet, right? And so it's not like this is a bad environment. The players don't dislike Brian Callahan. If we do blow him out, we'll probably lose his dad, who's one of the most respected line coaches in the sport. Plus, we'll stretch our staff thin and put our young quarterback in an environment with an interim coach that maybe you don't want a young quarterback in. And so, I think that was sort of the prevailing feeling the last few weeks. And then everything did a 180 on Monday morning. And, I can just tell you, from the coach's standpoint, they generally have this meeting. It's normally at 11 a.m. It was at noon this week because they're traveling back from Vegas. And that's when the position coaches, give their review of their guys and the coordinators speak. That meeting, on Monday morning, was abruptly canceled. Then rescheduled for 12:30, which is where Callie wound up telling his staff that he'd been let go. I think this is a lot like the Mike Vrabel situation. It's Amy acting alone, and one thing that's common with every one of these moves, and I'm sure you've heard this, Jared, is Amy doesn't like being embarrassed, right? And she had a huge family contingent at that game in Vegas. And, I think just maybe some of the, you can go back over the years and look at them, right? You and I don't I know you don't think it's any coincidence that she gets that she fires John Robinson. What is it? 2 days after after they play against AJ Brown, right? I don't think it's a coincidence that she needs her pound of flesh after they have the worst record in the league. It's just all of these different moves seem to depend on A, like her own personal emotions, and B, whoever the last person she listened to is. And so I think that's sort of where you were at on Monday morning, that there was that feeling of embarrassment, and the potential that embarrassment could get worse 6 days later with Mike Vrabel coming to town, which I think influenced the move.
Bert, why does she love Chad Brinker as much as she does? I mean, I know Chad Brinker was at the Green Bay Packers, but he's been a part of all the big decisions they've made, including firing Vrabel, hiring Callahan, keeping Callahan, hiring Mike Borgonzi, and they've gotten worse and worse since Chad Brinker's here. And yet, even yesterday, he said, I speak for her. Why does she love him so much?
Well, I think because Chad's doing a lot of stuff that fans don't see that the organization really did need. Now, like if it's me, you want to rewind the clock 3 years. I'm finding a way to make it work with John Robinson and Mike Vrabel, right? Like, because I don't think that thing was broken. They hadn't drafted well for a couple of years, but you could do a lot worse than those two. And if you're bottoming out, which the bottoming out under them was 7-10 and 6-11 after, a run with Ryan Tannehill where you make the playoffs 3 times in 4 years. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, I think the way I would look at that one, I just think like there's that. And if you want to take that versus where they are now, yes, you rewind the clock and I think you make that work. But the way they were doing things back then, I think there was a lot of things within the organization that needed modernizing. The way the place was structured was kind of old school, and a lot of the methods were old school. And I think one thing that's sort of interesting about owners now, that a lot of people miss, like a lot of these owners, there's a reason why they're a lot of them are hung up on analytics or fascinated with analytics, is because it makes football more accessible to them. In other words, guys who are lifers like Vrabel and John Robinson are speaking a language that owners don't know. Whereas like you bring in somebody who has the analytical background or went to business school, and they're able to kind of reach the owner on their own level. And I think Chad has the combination of both that makes Amy really comfortable.
If you were to look at the Titans coaching position, they said yesterday it was a desirable job. I think all these jobs are desirable, the salaries, the positions, everything. Do people across the league know who's actually hiring the coach? Like, do they know, like, hey, Chad Brinker's hiring the coach, Mike Borgonzi's hiring the coach, Amy Adams Strunk is hiring the coach? Is there a sense that the Titans have a direction led by one person that would decide who the next coach is going to be?
I'd say the answer to that is not yet. And that you don't need to have an answer to it right now, Jared. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be another 3 months until they can even, bring anybody in and talk to them, so they don't need to have that answer yet, but I do know that when the time comes, they're going to need to have like real answers to those sorts of questions, because that's what guys are going to be coming in and asking. And I think the interesting piece of it, and this to me is going to dictate how attractive this job is how well Cam Ward plays the rest of the year. Because, you just kind of like look at where they're at. I would guess, right? Like that Cam Ward is not going anywhere in 26. He's not going anywhere in 27. So everybody has their own perception of what Cam Ward is right now. And if that perception is affected either positively or negatively by the way he plays, then that's going to materially affect how attractive the Titans job is. Because if you're a prospective coach, you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, I at least probably, my guess is I'm at least going to have to ride out 2 years with this guy. And based on the organization's recent history, like who the hell is going to believe they're getting more than 2 years? You know what I mean? So you almost have to believe in Cam Ward for it to be an attractive job, because I just don't know how you can count on having another shot at quarterback if you come to Tennessee and sign up for that job based on the timeline of the guys who were there before.
Bert, I think a lot of people were surprised when Vrabel got fired just because everybody thought Vrabel was such a good coach. I don't think that anybody looks at the record Brian Callahan had and thought that that wasn't deserving of a firing. But I do wonder, were people around the league still a little surprised given that it had been a year and a half and it hadn't been 2 years, 3 years of him as a head coach? What was kind of the reaction across the league when the Titans made this choice?
I mean, he was really well respected before he got the job. So that's one thing that I think you need to take into account. But based on where things were and based on how things have gone over the last few years in that organization and based on how the team looked, I don't think anybody was blown away, because I think Amy's now got a reputation of being an unpredictable owner capable of these sorts of things, it's just, you can put it in a bucket with teams like the Raiders where like strange things just seem to happen. And, it takes time to get yourself out of that category. But with the way that they've handled everything since Vrabel and Robinson walked out the door, they've earned that label, and so when things like this happen, I don't think it shocks anybody. In fact, like in a lot of cases, when someone gets fired from a place like that, most people think like, okay, like, well, maybe he'd be better somewhere else because that place is just what it is, So it's going to be interesting to see the way this goes. And, I think one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on is like, do they just go completely go in a completely different direction than, than we saw with Brian Callahan? Because one thing that was pointed out to me was how Rand Carthon was the polar opposite of John Robinson, and Brian Callahan was the polar opposite of Mike Vrabel, right? And so, like, that's the way bad organizations operate. Is like you make a mistake on one person, then you go all the way in the other direction, and you do that enough times, and you have no organizational identity anymore. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing the Titans have lost over the course of the last few years is, for better or worse, like when J-Rob and Vrabel were there, you knew exactly what they were. You knew what they were trying to build. You knew the type of players they were looking for. You know what the strengths of the team were going to be. You knew what the Titans were. Can anybody say what the Titans are right now?
They're a dumpster fire, but yeah.
But you know what I'm saying.
No, and you're right, because I wrote my list. I was kind of talking about who the Titans' next coach might be, and I was doing this like a game of guess who. So I'm like, they're not going to hire any coach that would demand full authority because Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi aren't giving that up. They're not going to pay a coach. People are talking about Dan Lanning. They're not going to pay a coach $10 million. So every college guy is out because they all make more than what the Titans are going to spend. And one of the ones I wrote down on the list was, I wrote, the Titans are a very reactive group. They try to hire the opposite of what they just had. Vrabel and Robinson bickered, so they hired Rand Carthon to get along with Vrabel. And then they hired Brian Callahan, who's the opposite of Vrabel. So now they're probably going to hire the opposite of Callahan, which makes me think, Bert, they are going to hire a former head coach. And I heard your former colleague Ian Rappaport put out there yesterday, Matt Nagy, Arthur Smith. I think the most important thing, I am preferential to Arthur Smith because I like Arthur Smith, but also people will say, well, Amy knows Arthur. I think it's more important that Arthur knows Amy.
It was Amy.
Because he would be knowing what he's getting himself into. And all I want to know about Arthur, he's done a good job in Pittsburgh. He did a good job here. Mm-hmm. What the hell happened in Atlanta with Desmond Ridder? Why did it suck so bad? And is Arthur going to be a name that people take seriously going forward?
Well, let me start with just what you said about him knowing Amy. I think that's super important, right? Like, I think one thing that people don't understand about these jobs is that you have to manage up, right? You have to manage your owner. And I always thought, like, I always remember, when Jason Garrett got the Dallas job, how good he was at managing Jerry Jones. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it's one of the reasons why he lasted for as long as he did. And like, they were never really a mess under Jason Garrett. You know what I mean? Like, he was able to really stabilize that place because he knew how to manage up, and he knew the dynamics of the organization because he was a player there. And so his history with that family went so far back. And I think you can say the same thing about Arthur Smith. And it's not just Amy. It's knowing the entire family. It's knowing all the dynamics with people like Kenneth. Like, it's understanding the way the organization works. And if you have like that sort of background in understanding the way things work, it gives you a chance to succeed, because you're going to be caught off guard by fewer things, And so where, like Brian Callahan could come in and be like, okay, like That interview went well. Like I got to meet everybody. Well, you know as well as I do, that's all happy horse bleep, right? Like when things go wrong is when you find out who people really are. And so if you have the background and knowing who they are, that's really going to help. As for what happened in Atlanta, I think the biggest thing to me, they did a good job of building up the roster. And if you watch them last night, like you see a lot of the guys that Arthur brought in and playing pivotal roles there, right? I would say the biggest problem was that first year they hung on to Matt Ryan, right? And they were trying to win in that first year. And then it was like, okay, we're going to reset. And then they passed on quarterbacks in 2 years. When you look at it and you see those weren't very good years to be drafting quarterbacks, right?
Yep.
So like he was actually right. In 2022, they didn't draft a quarterback. That was the Kenny Pickett year. In 23, they didn't draft a quarterback. Well, they had no access to Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And then what are they going to do? Trade up for Anthony Richardson? That wouldn't have worked either. And he was given like the green light by the organization. And this is, I don't know how much has been out there, but he was given the green light by the organization. Hey, like we sign off on you being patient at quarterback. And then it wound up being what cost him his job, And so he was trying to be patient and build up the roster. And the whole plan was, we're going to be a fully formed team. We're going to tread water at quarterback and be a fully formed team when we put the young quarterback in. And unfortunately, he wound up running out of time because again, it was one of these situations where the owner got a little bit impatient and didn't like some of the things that were coming back to him. And, X leads to Y, leads to Z, and now all of a sudden the conditions under which you were building, which were, you don't need to sell up for a quarterback right now, came back to bite him.
If Matt Nagy is out there, which we know that as a former coach in Chicago, I think Matt Nagy doesn't get enough credit for what he did in Chicago, making the playoffs twice with Trubisky. If Mike Borgonzi's making this hire, I feel like it's pretty simple to say it will be Matt Nagy. Yeah. Would you be surprised, or is Matt Nagy going to have better job offers and better situations to choose from?
Well, let's just remember too, like that, both those guys have head coaching experience. I think that's going to be important here. Because you talk about going the other way. I don't know if the Titans can afford another first timer, right? And both Arthur Smith and Matt Nagy have hands-on experience with quarterbacks, which I think really helps, right? And Nagy was a part of, developing Mahomes when he was a rookie and made his mistakes, in Chicago. But if you look again, like you said, in Chicago at what he accomplished over the course of his time there, they never really bottomed out until the very end. They won 12 games. And then you take a look at like what John Fox did before he got there, what Matt Eberflus did after he left, what Mark Trestman did before Fox. All of a sudden, like the context of it is like, maybe it wasn't him. You know what I mean? Like maybe he wasn't the problem. And so I think Matt learned a lot. I know he's been introspective about trying to learn and look in the mirror about what went wrong in Chicago. And he's obviously got that similar background with Borgonzi, where the minute he walks in the door, Borgonzi's going to know what he's looking for in players at every single position, so like there's no guessing or projecting there. And I feel like that was part of the problem with Callie is there was a lot of projecting, right? Like we knew his experience with quarterbacks. If you meet Callie, I mean, I'd be surprised if somebody met Callie 2 years ago and didn't say, yeah, this guy can be a head coach, right? Everybody would have thought it, but you were projecting, right? You were projecting as a leader. You were projecting as a play caller. And the production didn't match the projection there. With these guys who have experience, you're projecting less and even less so with somebody like Nagy, who, Borgonzi obviously has working experience with.
Is there any name on the coordinator circuit that you would say, hey, keep an eye on? A lot of Titan fans are excited about Joe Brady, as a potential candidate here. Jesse Mentor has been talked about, but it doesn't feel like there's a Ben Johnson right now that has established themselves as a coordinator who's going to be a hot ticket. Where are we on the coordinator?
So I don't know if you can take a swing on a Joe Brady, and I really like Joe, and it's nothing against him, but I don't know if you take a swing on a Joe Brady. I think and again, maybe this is a correction, but I think you do think about going back down that former player route, right? Like, cause you think about the people in the locker room and what resonated with them. And like if you feel like you've got guys in that locker room that are going to be a part of it for the next few years that were responding to Vrabel that maybe that didn't respond to Callie the same way, and you're thinking about the former player route, I got an interesting name for you that's a little off the radar right now. And that's the quarterback's coach in Denver, that Davis Webb, who is extremely well thought of, who's a great quarterbacks guy, who I think, like, if you get around him, you'll see he's kind of got the swagger and the presence of an ex-player. And I think he's somebody who could come in and galvanize a place pretty quickly. So Davis Webb would be one that I would keep an eye on. And along those lines, if we're looking at a former quarterback and all of that stuff, Cliff Kingsbury's another one, like where he has head coaching experience, extensive head coaching experience, both at college and pro, and, has done a good job in developing Jaden Daniels in Washington. So I think Davis Webb and Cliff Kingsbury would be two names I would kind of keep an eye on, because I think they check a bunch of boxes when you're talking about developing Cam Ward and bringing in somebody who's got some presence and somebody who might resonate with the players a little bit because, they are ex-players.
Two stupid things to ask you about. One is the fans here. I don't know what it is, Bert. They will not stop talking about John Gruden. It's come up 1,000 times. John McClain. I mean, I love John McClain. I know you do too. He tweeted out yesterday the Titans should hire John Gruden, and the fans said, Gruden. Am I wrong for saying the Tennessee Titans are not hiring a coach who is suing the league in court, which takes Gruden and Brian Flores off the list?
Yeah, I would say it's unlikely. I think it would take a certain type of owner to do it. And I don't think Amy's that type of owner. It would take a certain type of owner who's going to thumb his nose at the league and be like, you know what, I don't care what you think, like a Steve Bisciotti, you know what I mean? Like it would take somebody like that to do it. And I'd also be remiss if you didn't mention that there's somebody from high up in the league office in Adolfo Birch who's working for the Titans now, so there are league office connections there. I have a hard time seeing the Titans being the one that's going to stick its neck, that they're going to stick their necks out and make that hire. I think John Gruden can be a good head coach for somebody, but just based on what I know about the organization, like that might be something like the Saints would do. You know what I mean? Like, but I just don't see the Titans doing something like that.
And finally, last one for you. I am going on your station in Boston, I think, on Thursday.
Oh, awesome.
I think the Titans are going to win.
You're a star up here, by the way. I hope you know that. Like your Super Bowl appearance was electric.
I believe.
I don't know how much Mike liked it though.
We ran that we ran that on the stream. I was just like, screw it. Just run their stream and just put it on there. I think the Titans are going to win on Sunday. And I have coined this term probably 6 years ago. I called it the Vrabel special, which is Vrabel will win a game that nobody thinks he's going to win on prime time against a good quarterback. And then the next week he'll go out there and get his ass kicked. And I've seen it too many times. I saw them in a year where they beat up on Mahomes and Josh Allen and Stafford, lose to Tyrod Taylor, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones. And so between the Titans firing the coach and getting the interim coach bump, and I think Mike McCoy will be more structured than Callahan, plus the fact that I feel like Vrabel's taking a victory lap up there and is enjoying himself too much, I think the Titans are going to win the game on Sunday.
That'd be interesting. I can tell you, like that would turn around a lot of the runaway train of optimism that's rolling down the tracks here. I guess I wouldn't be totally stunned just because I do think so. I think looking at Mike McCoy's history is interesting, right? And that he's worked with different types of quarterbacks. He worked with Jake Delhomme all those years ago in Carolina, who's kind of an improviser. He worked with pure pocket guys and Peyton Manning and Phillip Rivers. And then he worked with the true option quarterback, Tim Tebow. I think because of that experience, they're going to be doing some more creative things with Cam. I also think like you're going to see Cam get a little bit more of a green light to go make plays. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's what's interesting about what's happened with the Patriots up here with Drake is like that. That first week, it looked like he was chained to the pocket and like, the wheels are turning in his head. And, I think, Josh and Vrabel kind of made the conscious decision. We got to let him go and be himself a little bit more. And you've seen the results since. I think that sort of thing could happen in Tennessee now with Cam, and I'm not saying he's all of a sudden going to become a superstar, but if you watch him play, I mean, don't you get that sense, Jared, watching him, that there's a little bit too much thinking going on, a little bit too much, like, it's just like conventional quarterback play when that's not what he is at this point,
I think Cam stinks.
Huh? Oh, you're already out on him.
Well, I'm not out on him. I think that when they drafted him, we talked about this at Super Bowl, and you were like, hey, the people I've talked to say that the quarterbacks in this class are not very good. It's more like 2022 than it is like the other years.
Yeah.
And I watched Cam's tape, and I'm like, I see talent. Like, I see a fluid athlete. He's got that Mahomes backyard football element to him, but he's not very accurate. He's got terrible footwork. He relies on his arm too much. And this is the Titans he's going to. This isn't, the quarterback factory here. This isn't Sean Payton. This is the Titans. And I just feel like the Titans are going to screw it up at coach. They're doing what I call the Jet playbook, because they've got a general manager from Kansas City and a president from Green Bay, and they sit those quarterbacks in Kansas City and they sit them in Green Bay, and the Jets draft a quarterback and they say, Sam Darnold is our savior. And then they fire the coach. So Todd Bowles stinks. He goes. Adam Gase is going to save him. And then after that, it's, well, he sucks too. So now Sam Darnold sucks. He's out. So now Zach Wilson's going to be the savior. And that's what all the stupid teams do. That's what the Jets do. That's what the Browns do. That's what the Giants do. I mean, Browns got rid of Baker Mayfield because the owner went on impulse buy with Deshaun Watson, and they have the best defense in the league and a great coach, and it doesn't matter because the owner's so stupid. That's what they are doing here with Cam. So it's not that I think Cam is going to be a bust because of Cam. I think Cam's going to be a bust because he went to this terrible organization.
So that's what's going to happen next year is Davis Webb's going to take the Titans job, and then he's going to bring Zach Wilson, who he worked with in Denver, with him. And Zach Wilson's going to beat out Cam Ward for the starting job. And then Cam Ward is going to go somewhere else and win wherever else it is. Right. It's almost jarring at this point how many reclamation stories we're seeing. You know what I mean? Like how you've got Baker Mayfield, you got Sam Darnold, Geno Smith was able to pull his career out of a dumpster the last, over the last 4 or 5 years. And now you're seeing it with Daniel Jones in Indianapolis. Like I think you're right. Like in that, like, not enough credence is given to the environment that these guys are in and how important that is. And so I think that's the number one thing now. Like you look at like where the Titans are, it's like, how do we not screw this kid up? Because what is this? Like it was 4 in a row, right? Like where the number 1 overall pick quarterback had his coach fired in season. And, Trevor, I think, has still felt the effects from that in Jacksonville. He was considered generational. And then, you see, what it's meant for Bryce Young and Caleb Williams, how it's kind of how it stunted their growth. Whether or not they come out of it, we'll see. But, I think, Cam certainly, I think to some degree, you got to give him a little patience now because the circumstances definitely haven't been ideal.
Bert, great stuff, buddy. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to hop on with us.
All right. Thanks, Jared.
Yep. Albert Breer from the Monday Morning Quarterback, the senior NFL reporter, joining us on the program. And I do think Bert started to enjoy that little rant there that I had at the end. But I think Cam's going to be a bust, and I don't think it's Cam's fault. By the way, I love the fact that the distinguished gentleman, did I bring up Sam Darnold other than to say that everybody in New York said he sucked? And TDG, Sam Darnold doesn't suck. So I want to thank Albert Breer, and I want to thank you guys. And I hope you guys enjoyed going a little bit later than normal here on the program. So we'll get the podcast out. And again, if anything goes down, anybody gets hired, anybody else gets fired, anything, we will hit right to it. Enjoy the podcast. Thanks to Albert Breer for stopping by with us. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those are my guys. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Like and subscribe. Hit those buttons. That's right. Again, it's free to like it, and it helps. And subscribe so we can keep this thing going. It's been a lot of fun. Stillman and Company, unless something goes down between now and then, we'll see everybody live tomorrow at 2:00.